Good evening, Jessica Van Vonderen with ABC News Sunday. He's described it as a miracle, but Scott Morrison's being praised by his party as a Liberal hero for pulling off a shock win for the coalition in this weekend's election. Bill Shorten's already announced he's quitting as Labor leader and a race to replace him is shaping up. Around 3/4 of the votes are counted. The coalition's won 41% of the primary vote, Labor's in the low 30s, and after the Greens, everyone else is in single digits. What's not known yet is whether the coalition will govern with a majority. It's secured 74 of the 76 seats needed to form government. 7 are in doubt. But what's not is Scott Morrison's historic achievement in bringing the government back for a third term in office, only 8 months after he became Australia's 30th Prime Minister. National Affairs correspondent Greg Jennett begins our coverage.
In the midnight hour, they cried more, more, more. And as Saturday passed into the Sabbath,
I have always believed in miracles.
A moment of divine deliverance.
And tonight we've been delivered another one.
Faith in the Morrison experiment had been rewarded.
Tonight is about every single Australian who depends on their government to put them first.
Watched keenly by Father John.
I'm feeling very good tonight.
Mother Marion and a nation that struggled to fathom what had happened.
It's looking very strongly like the Morrison government will be returned.
Queensland was awash in a tide of blue.
We are giving that seat to the Liberal parties.
From Leichhardt in the north to Longman and Dixon in the south.
This is the sweetest victory of all.
There were changes through Tasmania and New South Wales too. But that state was also the scene of a monumental defeat.
I'm certainly not going to let one bad day spoil 25 great years.
I thank him for his service to the nation, and I thought his concession speech tonight was the epitome of grace.
I know that you're all hurting, and I am too.
Labor's pains were laid bare.
We're doing well.
On a long, doleful night of losses, its leader of almost 6 years among them.
I wish we could have won for the true believers. I will not be a candidate in the next Labor leadership ballot.
He'll stay on as an MP, but his almost lifelong ambition to become Prime Minister appears to have been forever thwarted in one miserable day. For the next 3 years, the responsibilities and trappings of office remain in the care of Scott Morrison.
Now, Lily's a little bit tired, so the game's got to be really exciting.
Josh is going home in the back of a Derby van.
And his team of merry survivors.
Cheers, Josh.
They've pulled off the upset of the ages.
God bless Australia.
Now, the even harder bit awaits. This win was engineered through shrewd political cunning and in part through preference profiteering from Clive Palmer's foray into big spending campaigning. Well, all of that's behind Scott Morrison. Ahead are the mechanics of forming a ministry, getting the new parliament back to work and somehow trying to get an agenda passed into law. Let me bring in our political editor, Andrew Probyn now. And Andrew, what are the big lessons to be learnt from the events of this weekend?
Well, Greg, Scott Morrison's pulled off one of the most remarkable political victories since Federation. He did it with a small target, disciplined campaign that unashamedly focused more on the Labor Party's ambitious agenda than the coalition's. He did it almost single-handedly and in his own way. It was negative and it was effective, and he was aided by the Labor Party, which by its own admission was offering perhaps too big an agenda with too many targets to defend. with a leader in Bill Shorten who lacked popularity. Even though this election will likely result in almost identical parliamentary numbers, it'll transform politics for decades to come. It's doubtful another opposition will be so audacious in its offerings. As for Scott Morrison, the nature of his shock victory gives him great personal authority to implement an as-yet unwritten agenda.
What's your name?
Scott. Introducing himself to millions of Australians.
The Prime Minister's happy.
Since becoming Prime Minister, Scott Morrison has supercharged brand ScoMo.
There we go.
The rugby league loving tragic and devoted family man. An energetic everyman marketing himself after selling Australia to the world as a tourism ad man. And over a frenetic 5-week campaign, he appealed to the aspirations of Middle Australia.
These are the quiet Australians who have won a great victory tonight.
The pitch to undecided voters was simple, yet effective.
Bill Shorten wants to tax you more.
After running an almost presidential campaign, the coming days will be spent reshaping his front bench. Key figures expected to remain in their current portfolios include Josh Frydenberg, Peter Dutton, Matthias Cormann, Greg Hunt, Maurice Payne and the Environment Minister, Melissa Price. Linda Reynolds will be promoted to Defence Minister, but other frontbenchers who retired in the portfolios of Indigenous Affairs, Human Services and Jobs will need to be replaced. Scott Morrison continues to occupy Kirribilli House with a mandate to slash personal income tax. But without voter approval for many other new ideas, he'll have to tread carefully before embarking on any major policy shifts. Colleagues are urging the leader to shut down some policy differences.
Take some of the elements of the Labor campaign and look at them and say, well, where were the issues that motivated some people to vote Labor, and what can I do to assuage and ameliorate those concerns?
And continue as healer-in-chief for a party that tore itself apart last year.
What we'll see from Scott Morrison, as we already have, is a Prime Minister that wants to govern from the centre.
With no former Prime Ministers in the Parliament to manage, the new Liberal hero should wield considerable internal power.
Who'll have the upper hand in driving Liberal Party policy if you're re-elected?
I will.
The question now, what will he do with it? Dan Conifer, ABC News, Sydney.
Well, Scott Morrison will be imbued with an authority over the coalition that his two predecessors couldn't count on, or not for a full term anyway. But on the other side of the House, authority is a quality still in search of a leader now that we've learnt Bill Shorten's moving off to make way for a new one.